Hey everyone, this is Dan. Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. If you haven't bounced upon this podcast in some time or ever, we are primarily a 12-step recovery based podcast, although I do explore other avenues in which people find their true selves. And I bring to the show people who are not in recovery who have tools that those of us who are in recovery may want to harness and use to help us grow and to help us to further our recovery. The big book art of Alcoholics Anonymous tells me that one of the requirements is that I must continue to grow spiritually in order to keep this thing. And thankfully, God has provided many ways to do that. The universe has provided many ways to do that. I want to plug the other podcast, the I Am One Two podcast. It's the letter I, the letter M, the number one, the number two. Uh, I am one too. Simply that. It's on YouTube. It's a video. It's also out on the audio only channels as well, where my sponsor and I sit down and provide education of these same terms, these same stuff. Basically, 12-step recovery mixed in with tools that anybody can use. I'll put that in the show notes if you didn't catch it, and we'll get rolling. This is my guest today. He popped into the Spiritual Underground. It's kind of funny when you see I am very attuned to new people and the people who come through my home group. And if you've come to my home group once and you don't come back for a while and you come back, I will remember you. And more than likely, if I had a chance to talk to you, I will remember your name. So I think it's a little gift that higher power has given me of remembering people's names and faces and recognition. So many people always say, "Well, I can't remember name. I can't remember anybody." Well, that is not my problem. I remember names, and but part of that is, and some of that is part of my own thing. When I see somebody I don't know and they come into the Spiritual Underground, I try to make like I've had somebody else teach me to like create an anchor around something, and I try to anchor in on this person. We go around the room and say names. I know most people, but I need to put a little extra energy into the guy that I don't know so that I remember his name. I don't, these 10 people in front of him, I've known them for a while, but that guy I need to plug into my brain because I don't know him and I want to. And Mike came in and same thing. It was via the Zoom, which does create its own difficulties in itself too, because it's a lot different to have a box up there on our screen than it is to have a warm body in the room. But Mike came in and how he got there will, I'm sure, will be part of his story here today. So how's it going today, Mike?
I'm doing great. I'm actually really excited to be here. I love that you say that the ability to remember names is a gift for you because it's actually a gift that I don't have. But despite that, I remembered your name from the very first meeting at Spiritual Underground because you were the other guy in the meeting in a suit.
Must have been a birthday night, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, I've been trying to step up my game on birthday nights to honor the what we got going on in there, and
Yeah.
trying to do that. What's your sobriety date?
2/12/15.
2/12/15. So that's just a minute. I'm 1/1/15. So we're about on top of each other. So that means you are creeping in on 10 years. Very, very
Yeah,
cool.
I know.
Uh, Or I always usually talk to people about their early life and how they grew up and this kind of thing. Where were you? Where were you born and where did you spend your childhood?
Okay, so there's a lot of details there. I'll do a little glazing. I was born actually in Houston, Texas, raised in Henderson, Kentucky. I was raised there my whole life, believing it was a small town. And then whenever I went other places, I realized it's kind of a medium-sized town, and there's a lot of opportunity there that I kind of squandered away in my youth.
Yeah,
Um,
Henderson and Evansville are kind of like one community, pretty much.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
same way right here, Louisville and New Albany, where we got the river runs through us, but there's a lot of intermingling going on.
Yeah, and it's the same way down here in my new place in Southern Illinois. It interacts directly right with Paducah. It's right across the water.
Yep.
And so I was born in Houston, raised in Henderson, Kentucky. Whenever I was a small child, I mean, very small. Until I was 7, my dad was an alcoholic, like raging alcoholic.
Mm,
The only he supported us through hustle and pull and driving a truck, because that's what those guys did to get by in the 80s and 90s, or early 90s anyway. So in that time of like absentee parentism, I had endured some trauma that I didn't really deal with at all until I was nearly 30 years old. And so I started, because I didn't deal with it, I started exhibiting signs and symptoms of what they believed were mental health issues. They were definitely mental disturbances
mhm.
because I had been traumatized. I learned all this stuff eventually, throughout my work in the steps and just general therapy and other studies that I do outside of my current school. Um, so by the time I was age 7, I was a Ritalin kid. They diagnosed me with ADHD because I was super bright and super energetic and super out of control because I really had stuff I needed to deal with that no one knew about. So by the time I was 10 years old, I was maxed out on that and transferred to something they called Dexedrine. By the time I was 13, I had been transitioned already to Adderall. That's when my teeth started falling out. So needless to say, around 13, I also hit puberty. My family moved from a rural community out in the country into the city, and I made friends. Along the way, I found narcotics. And I learned that those pills they were giving me were just like the meth my neighbor was cooking.
Mm.
So that pretty well started my meth use. Of course, alcohol came along with that. And it has been a vice for me many times, a gateway that just straight sent me down the same path. But my
Were
primary,
you doing meth and Adderall at the same time?
oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Within the next 4 years, I had, while still excelling in school, managed to rack up a heck of a criminal record as a juvenile, and narrowly escaped completely being locked up for the rest of my juvenile career several times. At 17 years old, though, I was supposed to be on my way to work. I had skipped work to go get high with my buddies. My dad had warned me that morning, you better change that tire on that truck. There's a spare tire and wheel in the back of the truck. The jack and everything's there. It's supposed to rain today. If you don't change it, you'll regret it. I didn't listen because what teenagers do? That mom and dad don't know best. Anyways, I flipped that truck at 60 miles an hour that day. The x-rays and scans within the next week resulted in them discovering at 17 years old, I had osteoarthritis. That's old man, you've been wearing your back out your whole life disease, and you need to stop working. Kind of messed up at that age. But that came with a lifetime prescription of opiates. And from the very first one, I knew I loved them. That is that I say that is my true vice, because that is what I literally destroyed my life over. I've harmed every person I've ever come in contact with. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life thanks to the DOC. And for that, I claim out of respect for the fellowship that I'm an alcoholic, because it doesn't matter what your drug of choice is. It's all an addiction, and it can all be treated the same way.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. It's one of the things about the spiritual underground is we don't draw those lines. That's, I think, one of the reasons why it works. Technically, there's probably more addicts in that room than there are alcoholics, and frankly, I don't run into too many pure alcoholics
Yeah,
today.
it's kind
Most
of
of them are
rare.
dual, they're
Most are
playing
doable
around.
in some
Let me
way.
ask you a question about this though, like this arthritis, this early onset arthritis.
Yeah.
How long had you been doing meth on a regular basis to there? Because I kind of wonder about, that stuff is, I think you'll
About,
agree, it's plain poison.
about 3 years off and on,
Did anybody ever
intermingled with the amphetamines. Of course, I was prescribed to those amphetamines
yeah, so you were taking them for a lot longer than just
since
the
I was
meth.
7. At
So
that point, it was a whole
makes
decade that
makes
I'd
me
been
wonder
exposed
maybe
to
if
amphetamines.
makes me wonder if it might have had a hand in this breaking down your bone structure and causing problems
Yeah,
for you.
well, getting pharmaceutical companies to admit to things like that
Yeah, oh
is
yeah, I know.
an
Yep,
uphill
yep,
battle
yep,
for sure.
yep. But there's no question in my mind that methamphetamine, meth is poison. It is
Yeah.
made from some really bad stuff,
Oh yeah.
and I would not be surprised if there wasn't a connection in there someplace. But go ahead, the flip
Yes.
truck, and
So that gets me to age 17. That's when I started to kind of spiral more out of control when I got my hands on the pain pills. Obviously, because I had for the last decade been on amphetamines prescribed to a doctor. So clearly that was in some way medically manageable by them, they thought. Um,
about what year was that? Is that prior
um,
to the lockdown
so
on the stuff?
um,
Not lockdown, but there was a piece someplace around 2005, 2006, something like that, where they really cranked down on the pain pills and your
oh
name
yeah,
went in a bucket and
yeah.
all that. So it was
So
pre that
actually,
when you could just get
actually,
like bucket loads of it.
yeah, it was definitely pre that. And part of like the pain management clinic one of the pain management clinics I wound up being a part of eventually long term, uh, wound up being shut down by the feds and all that stuff. And of course, that led to it being harder for me to get my hands on what I needed. Of course, I was age 23, 22 or so at that point. So that would have been 2007 or so, when whenever their crackdown really started affecting me.
Yep, yep.
um and at that of course we just skipped like a bunch of stuff a bunch of time, but there's really not anything truly significant in that chunk of my life, honestly, other than
That cycle,
a
just
bunch of
that cycle.
unhealthy relationships, a bunch of BS part-time gigs here and there, and things, harms done to other, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Harms done to myself. Um, Bad reputation I built for myself back home. And so then about the time that that crackdown happened and my pill mill had gotten busted, then I turned to selling drugs. I turned when I say I turned to selling drugs, I mean I turned to rely on selling drugs, because as soon as I was introduced to street drugs, I was introduced to the price.
mm,
And so as a daily drug user, you do what you have to get by. um, I was prosecuted eventually for that drug trafficking in the DOC. I was picked up originally August 27th, 2013, but I didn't come to my sobriety until 2/12/15. That's because I cycled in and out of treatment centers a couple times. Um, Thanks to the Danville Boyle County SAP program that I graduated from and the peace that I found in the fellowship, I now am planning to schedule to go speak at that center that I walked out of twice. And
just for the uneducated or the people who aren't in it. When we say DOC, we're talking about the Department of
Department of
Corrections.
Corrections, yeah.
SAP is a substance abuse program thing that is incorporated into jails a lot of times, right? Or jails and prisons.
Yes,
Most
of course. And I forget sometimes that some of
okay, no
our
problem.
viewers might not always be averse to our terms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even if we get to talking 12-step speak, that's even, there's a lot of things we say that are not, you can clue into somebody out in the world someplace and they'll drop certain lines and you're like, hey man, are you in recovery? Because of the way we talk and the other things we say. So I do try to. I'll tell you what. I watch a lot of military podcasts. I like to watch the veterans talk about their stories and stuff.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about an acronym heavy deal, man. Their stuff is just laden with
Oh yeah, I
acronyms,
know.
and
I
the good hosts go and slow that down and say, okay, what is this? What is that? What is this? What is
yeah.
that? So that it gets it down. So kind of pick that up for my own show too.
Yeah, I play actually Call of Duty with a lot of ex-military
Yeah,
members. Oh, I'm familiar with a lot of those acronyms they're pumping out
You
all
know
the
what?
time.
One of the things that really hit me, and I know there's something again, there's something special going on at the spiritual underground. But one thing that I noticed is that like the only other place I've really seen the bonding of men happen, like it's happening at the spiritual underground, is military veterans,
Yeah,
especially combat veterans.
yeah,
And they've gone through something like that traumatic stuff. They've gone through it and they know what each other's been through. And so when they get out the other end, they still have that connection, even if they weren't in the same battles and working fighting side by side,
yeah,
they have a connection. And I see that, this battle with addiction. And again, I am really quick to apologize to any veterans because my point is not to this is what they went through. My point is to say that I see a bonding of men happen in the same way, and I don't see it anyplace else except for military veterans.
yeah. I would say the bond and the fellowship that is spiritual underground is why I attend through my Zoom every chance I can, and why I'm here today. And really, so we'll go ahead and soon get there. But no, so we'll jump there for now.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and jump there. So how I came to the spiritual underground. Um, so a lot of a lot of life was lived between 2007 there and when I got picked up and
What did you get? What were you
whenever I
doing?
got clean. Do
You
what?
were dealing, what were you doing? Do you
Oh
mind
yeah.
saying exactly
So
what you got
I
caught doing?
actually maintained selling drugs for a long time until I started selling the things that I was told not to sell, meth and cocaine. And I got immediately busted. It took them
Hmm.
6 months to pick me up.
So you're
And
selling other stuff, what, selling weed and selling stuff
yes,
like that, and you
primarily
didn't
I
have
sold
really any
cannabis.
problem.
Yeah. In
Yeah,
my
and
hometown. And
yeah,
for the most part, I was overlooked and taxed every few months through various pickups with fines and charges, come get your possession and your paraphernalia, pay us every few months.
yeah. And there was a time or whatever, and may still be in effect, but the and I'll say it, I'll just speak it the way that I see it because of some of the people. Distribution of methamphetamine got a disappropriate amount of penalty.
Yeah, it
You
really
could go to
did.
jail like you kill somebody and get
I
less
know.
time.
I know.
Uh,
You have a baggie with dust in it and you're doing 5 years. It don't
yeah,
matter
yeah,
what you say,
they
it's
were.
over.
And I get it, it's bad stuff, and I get
It
it that
is.
they're going to put a harsh penalty on it for that reason. And
There
but
needs
still,
to be
I know a
treatment
girl.
as an alternative.
Yep, I know a gal here locally who was sentenced to 30 years for manufacture and distribution of meth, and she didn't receive her sentence until she was 5 years sober or so. And she had turned her life around. She had opened up a
Man,
women's recovery center here in New Albany. She was the real deal, doing a program and everything. And the
Lord.
judge said, she's been on the show telling this story, and the judge said, "Oh, we don't care. We're the resume you built up has nothing to do with punishment for your crimes," and gave her the full 30 years. And but she was only actually served for 10 months. And I don't mean to say only, but when you talk about 10 months and you talk about 30 years, there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of 10 months isn't
That's a huge
only in that.
difference.
And God saw fit to let her go in the system and do work there for a while and then turned her back loose. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the deal is she is on home incarceration the rest of her life. And I've never heard of that before. But I see her out and about and doing stuff, and she owns a construction company here in town. And uh, I always
Yeah,
say,
that just
well,
means
I
you
was
got to
on
get
home.
permission for everything. That's
Right,
all.
right, yep, 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 yep. I was on home incarceration for 9 months, and for a dude on home incarceration, I was not home very much. I slept here, but
Yeah,
uh, so going back to how you
yeah,
got into, there's all those little, and I get it because like it gets rather mundane when a dude like has his rap sheet and he just runs through and everything
yeah,
like it. In September 2003, I got picked up for this and did this, and here's what, and then
yeah.
June of 2004, I got, and then in June, it's
That's
like,
what books
yeah,
are for.
yeah, that's the so I appreciate you kind of your way of getting to the point.
Yeah, essentially, I was picked up for the last time on 2/12/15 in Crittenden County. Whenever I had only been out for 2 months, I didn't run from the law or anything. I literally had my family take me to the treatment center that I was ordered to go to, and told them not to stay gone long, that I was waiting on 5:30. And
Mm,
I left at 5:30 because at that point they would have to wait till Monday to call the parole office, and then it takes 60 days for your warrant to show up. So I literally went to the address they had on file and waited. On
mm,
2/12/15, my son answered the door for the police and
wow.
excitedly said, "You must be looking for my daddy. Come on,
Mm.
he's pooping." And took him right to the bathroom where I was waiting. In the beginning, I was devastated, mostly at what I saw that do to him immediately.
Yeah,
He by that point, it was the third time he saw me get arrested, and he was very aware that they were taking daddy. Um, he wasn't quite aware yet that daddy needed help and that daddy was glad that they took him that day. Um, so I was picked up for the last time on 2/12/15. I sat in the Crittenden County for a little bit and then got shipped back home, blah, blah. Eventually on June the 5th, 2015, I was transported to Danville County, Boyle County, Danville Detention Center. Not really knowing that I was going to SAP, but knowing I had applied for it. Um, and that's where I met Lincoln. Um, we,
we know as LJ, who has been on the show.
yeah. Um, I was there probably 3 or 4 weeks before I saw half the facility get kicked out because they couldn't follow the rules. They had smuggled in some tobacco somehow, whatever. Point was, half the facility got liquidated.
Mm,
And 2 days later, I met Lincoln. Um, so I still wasn't like in any way in my head thinking that I was wrong for anything I had done. Maybe that I needed to make different choices, but I couldn't see myself in a sober light yet, you know, couldn't look back on my past and clearly review it. I didn't know how. I mean, come on, they had started giving me drugs before I ever started taking drugs. Um, so I was there for almost 3 months. No, almost 4 months. It was October the 19th, 2015, whenever LJ invited me to church. He conned me into coming to church. I was mad at God. I really had believed that everything that had gone wrong in my life was all his fault, and he had abandoned me, and like I wasn't good enough anymore. Like he didn't care. My God, the God I've found through my recovery. Um, and for me, that's a Christian God. To each their own. But he invited me to church, and of course, as a inmate, I went for pizza. Um, and there was a video. It was called the Potter's Wheel. In the video, it compares someone who's been through hard times. I'm bumping into the thing my computer's sitting on. It's like one of those little music easels that you
what
do
is
your
it?
performance sheet music on. Anyways, um, so it compares a person who's been through struggles and hardship to a pot that's been put in the kiln so it can be hardened and come back out as a vessel to carry good things for you. And in that moment, I tingle now whenever I say it. In that moment, I feel like God took some blinders off my eyes and exposed to me a new reality that all the things, all the bad stuff I had been through was not God turning his back on me, but God holding my hand through it because I was doing it to myself. And they were meant to, him helping me through them are meant for me to be a vessel to deliver that hope to other people. And that's what was right around me for the last 4 months while I was in that facility, and I didn't see it. So the next day, I started looking around, seeing what some of the other guys further along were doing and seeing what they seemed to be getting, if anything. Most in a DOC program are faking it till they get out, honestly.
Yeah,
But
right.
there were some guys that were getting some good stuff out of it. And so I could see some hope a little since I was in a program. Um, and so then I decided at that point I would treat it like school. If nothing else, I can do the work and keep my head up and listen and learn. Maybe I'll gain some tools. By the time I had graduated on January the 5th of 2016, I believed that not only had I gained some tools, but I had gained hopefully a few brothers that I might continue to know for the rest of my life. And also the ability to create a path for myself. Because until then, I was just running a rat race set up by whatever pharmaceutical company or ad company was in front of my face,
Yep. Like the pinball in the pinball machine, just bouncing off whatever I
or
hit.
in front of my parents' faces in the beginning, or the schools, you know. After graduating, I stayed there for 2.5 months until I was released on parole, and stayed to be a GED mentor. I helped 8 guys and the assistants with the GED instructor there, of course. We all 8 of them achieved that semester.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, I've gotten a little emotional, and so I get a little stuttery. Tell me something
Okay.
about your story, so I can calm down for a sec.
Yeah, I get it. Um, and that's it. Like as a host here, sometimes I always want to try and not. I want to give you the space, right? Because everybody knows the people listen to this know me, and it's something I've learned to do. There's times you can listen to podcasts where I'm butting in too much, and I get some good feedback from some people to let the guy go, and if there's and don't be afraid of little periods of silence. If there's a period of silence, I don't worry about it too much. But you know, to look at where when people like, we say sometimes, so and so's not ready, or I just wasn't ready, and I think the word maybe is also receptive. There's a period of time where I just wasn't receptive to a solution for, the solution that was given me. Now, I was wore out, and I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. And I wanted to find a way out, but anytime somebody came and offered me a way out, I would, nope, nope, that's not, instantly reject this help that people were offering me, and I had to get into a big pickle. I had to have some real, serious consequences before I would start listening. And to be honest, I don't know that at the time that I got sober, I can't stand here and say I was wanting to get sober. What I was wanting to do was not go to prison. That's what I was wanting to do. And I knew, or I assumed, because I had to fill out all kinds of paperwork that said I wouldn't use drugs and alcohol during this period of time I was out on bail, that I knew that getting drunk and high was not going to be, was no, certainly, I didn't know it was going to keep me from prison as it did. It actually, 12 steps kept me from having to go spend a day in jail or prison. But I knew for a fact, there was no question in my heart about getting high and drunk would not be on the path to staying out of prison. So, I did a thing pretending to be sober for a while, but that at some point that your soul gets cracked open in some weird way. And like you said, it sounded like it was a video that might have been and it usually is some catalyst for somebody
Yeah.
to
It
like,
was really a
boom, there's a
series of
lights on
catalysts.
moment. Yeah. It's usually what I know from doing some of these podcasts, it's usually a series of little things, or, and I don't even want to say little, a series of things. And then one of them goes boom. And then, you start seeing things a little differently and it seems sudden, but actually, it was something that was a evolving thing moving in your life for a little bit, and that's really what happened to me too. I had to this met some really good people in the program in 2011 when I first came to AA, and they did a lot of seed planting in me. So then when I got receptive and desperate enough in 2014, 2000, late 2014, all that seed planting sprouted, and I was like, oh yeah. And at the same time, I met the spiritual underground, and I walked in there and felt this group of guys that had something going on. I'd been to lots of meetings in the past, but when I walked into that meeting, something was different about it. And ultimately that probably was my ding dong moment, that made me like open open up my eyes and become receptive, because whatever these guys had, I wanted. You can go to a lot of A
Yeah.
meetings and not really get to see something that you want.
Yeah, see that
uh,
that's something that really struck me after he had invited me to the meeting, was that if when I even from Zoom, I felt like I had walked in to the most spiritually connected church I've ever walked into. From Zoom, I felt that
yeah.
way. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. So that's part of why I was so grateful that I had met him back in 2016. And that
How
was
did
it.
y'all reconnect? Did y'all
Yeah.
stay connected through that period, or
No,
did what?
well, a little. So I graduated before he did. I went home and I had some real strong recovery. You know, that program had given me a lot, and I went home and I had strong recovery, but I went home to a place where all the meetings were forced meetings. And so I went there trying to find me a sponsor.
Hmm.
And I mean, while I had some good recovery, enough wrong sponsorship will fail you over time and put you off to any program. And so, uh, my first sponsor, uh, we just weren't right. I tried to pick the grumpy old guy that would probably tell me things I didn't like. And well, I had too much energy for him. He was just too old. He couldn't deal with me. um, maybe I should talk to that guy today. See what he thinks of me. Um, so then my second one uh was about a year later, because I had spent some time working with that one and then spent some time alone before seeking another. Uh and with my second one, he had some really great recovery and I loved it. I love that man. I still love him to this day. I still talk to him to this day. Um his name is Chris. And Chris, unfortunately, he was 3.5 years clean when I met him. So about a year into being my sponsor, Chris relapsed right before 5 years and dropped me. Now, it's not like I blame him or something, but I definitely blamed the local fellowship group that I had available to me at that point. I started going, okay, maybe I need to be looking elsewhere. I'm in Henderson. There's Evansville right across the bridge. There's other options. I can try to branch out. Of course, I wasn't exactly financially well off enough to be driving to other towns yet for meetings. Thank God today I am. um, so blah blah blah. I said thank God today
So
I am. I kind of got
yeah,
lost there.
yeah, but you had to, you were introduced, and I don't know if that's right, but because introduced, I went to my first AA meeting when I was 16 years old
Oh
after
yeah,
my first
I know where
DUI,
I'm at.
so I had some AA in me, but it took until I was 45 years old to hear it. They'll
Yeah,
think, do
see,
you listen to
actually,
Jimmy or do you hear Jimmy?
I was kind of introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous as a juvenile. Um, when I was on probation and parole as a juvenile, clearly I was failing drug tests for anything I could get my hands on. And I was so smart, for some reason, they didn't want to lock me up. They were like, come on, just get it right, Michael. I really feel like that's been my whole life. Authority figures my whole life have been saying, get it right, Michael, get it right. um, And so, yeah, I was kind of exposed initially at 17 years old. And then I doubled back on it whenever I originally got sent to the Owensboro Regional Recovery down in Owensboro. I'd been sent there twice, cycled out. Um, so After a few failed sponsors, I kind of stepped away from AA completely locally. I held on to my book. I held on to practicing my daily uh, meditation routine, and I held on to reading in my big book and reading in my Bible and my prayer and my meditation. I reconnected with the church, with my church at the time, and I doubled down on my family. I kind of remained completely withdrawn from recovery communities of any sort. And miraculously, I maintained my sobriety throughout all that and throughout the rise of becoming the Joneses and keeping up with them all at once while serving a dollar in pursuit of what we thought was uh, what our children deserved. You know, me and my wife had come to a point where we believed that we needed to give our kids all the nice things, and we had worked to a point where we could. I had repaired my credit enough, and she had maintained employment and became a store manager in fast food, was making good money. We got a great house, and we maintained that for a while. Then the pandemic happened. 2 months into the pandemic, we nearly lost one of our children. They believed that they couldn't talk to us about some personal problems that they were dealing with and struggling with. And they ran away and tried to harm themselves. So we threw the brakes on our whole life at that point. My wife literally took a month off work. We got that child into mental health treatment, inpatient, and we took all the rest of them and went on a vacation. In that time, that the missing child came home, and we realized that we had become a family, and we had stopped being a family and become 6 people who lived in a house that didn't know each other. And we could see very clearly that that was a wake-up call, and God needed us to correct that. So we threw all of our big fancy house and all the stuff that goes along with it away, and we went to school. But of course, whenever you're doing good things in God's name, the enemy will come against you. You know, the world will come against you whenever you're trying to do what's right. It doesn't matter who your God is, whatever. If you're doing good work in the world wants money. They don't want service. So the whole time, the first year, we had struggles, little financial issues, this and that, but we maintained and we did what was right. We stayed in our word, and we did what we could do best for our children with the resources given. A year ago, on August 19th, our family fell victim to CPS abuse. That forced me out of our home. People outside of our home who didn't know us, because we isolated for the whole first year going to school. So no one knew us, but people outside of our home filed false reports accusing me of harming our kids. Yeah. And
Get
the
in that
second,
web.
huh?
You get wrapped up in that web, man. Sure.
Yeah, the second
It's
that
a
they showed up at our house, I was at school training students for the esports team, getting them signed up for tournaments when I got the call. But from the very moment they left our house, they started a process of one vacation after another that made it impossible to complete the process and return me home quickly, because I've never harmed any of my children or any member of my family in any way other than my younger brother. And I served time for that one. He's 15 months younger and a lot bigger. And as siblings, we fought a lot when we were little. I glazed over that a little bit because it hurts to realized that from the time he was 12 till 18, he was locked up too the
Oh,
whole
wow.
time. Yeah. So, anyways, after 25 days of vacation, this person, vacation, that person, me either staying in a tent or my truck or a hotel that my school put me up in, and showering at my school and getting food from food banks.
Yeah, hang on a second. I think we'll see. Hey, electric's out. Huh? Some of the electric is out. Half of it is. What caused it? I don't know yet. I took a nap and woke up and my phone told me the internet wasn't working. Some of it's working, some of it ain't. Yep. So I figured I'd go ahead and do this. I came upstairs, but you was asleep, so I went ahead and started on this podcast. And yeah, I thought it was just upstairs, but we got some lights out down here. The kitchen's not working. The dining room must be one leg gone. Hmm. But well, that's on a different story. But the air's not working either. Air conditioner for. I guess we check them fuses out in the garage. Okay, well, I figure I'll do it in just a little bit when you were ready. Thought that might happen.
That's awesome. I wish my dad was chiming in the middle of this, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I actually sometimes he will come into it, and I don't cut it. I just let it be. I don't. I tell him, I guess this is not a sterile, highly produced podcast because that's not the kind of lives we live anyway, right?
Now,
The sterile, highly produced kind of thing, man. We roll with this with
maybe
what is
someday.
one day at a time, and I don't know. I don't know. We are we're one day at a time living, and our we'll what I try to live where my feet are at. I try to be present with where my feet are at. Yeah, half the electricity in the house is off, but I had an appointment with you, and if I have the means to do it, so we're
Yeah,
doing it. So sorry about the interruption there.
no worries.
So
So yeah, a
help
year
me with
ago.
when you say you were vacation. What does that mean? You said one vacation after another.
Okay, so we were victims of CPS abuse. That means CPS and police officers showed up at our house and accused me of harming our children.
Yep,
Told
yep, I
me,
got that.
told my wife that I had to leave the home until the investigation concluded. And what I mean is, it went from the worker who showed up at the house, who was in charge originally, taking a vacation for a week.
Okay, all right,
That
I get it.
made it take that whole week.
So other
Then
people's
she passed it
avail.
off. She passed it off to her supervisor, who took a vacation. And then, whenever they both came back, the officer involved, who, of course, along the way, they have to do a formal police interview, so they can determine whether or not to file charges
Mhm.
because it's serious.
Yep, yep.
Um,
That's when you said vacations. It confused me for a minute, but
yeah,
ultimately it was these people who are running your show now
yeah,
are not available.
yeah, yeah. Hey, pause your whole life. I've been the stay-at-home dad at that point for 8 years while my wife worked. So they pulled they pulled the mom out of the house essentially, and then told the dad of the house, my wife, that mom can't help you with the kids right now.
Yeah. Wow.
And good luck. By the way, we have no clue where you guys can find any help for this.
Yeah. And that's such a double-edged sword too, that because if kids are truly being harmed, that needs to be taken seriously,
Of
right?
course.
But but I have been in the past little while in a situation where the kids were being harmed and CPS just slow rolled the whole thing, and they ultimately never did anything about it. This other parent got in enough trouble on their own that ended up getting themselves in enough trouble that pulled them out of the situation. It wasn't the help that was being asked for that made that happen.
Personally, I've seen similar myself. And in my month of isolation from my family, I did wind up having to seek, help from various members of my community. And along the way, I met other men in this area who had experienced it, who experienced nearly the same scenario in this area. And the reality is that I think that this is like a premium example of why we need more people with lived experience, live playing those roles. People who have experienced CPS abuse or who have successfully navigated the social services system, things like that, they should be going out trying to be social workers, you know?
Yep. Parallel avenue is I've had chemical dependency counselors that didn't have any
I
chemical
know.
dependency
And that
stuff,
can be hard to deal with
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And frankly, it fell flat on my ears. Again, was I receptive or not at the moment? Blah 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 blah. Blah. But I really I struggled with that. What you ain't been where I've been. How can you be telling me about what's going on here?
So at the end of the 25 days, I call it 25 days later. It's actually a memoir that I wrote out.
Oh,
Uh,
did you?
yeah, submitted it for an award with Phi Theta Kappa. Um, anyway, so 25 days later, I'm escorted to the local police department by the ex-mayor of the town I'm sleeping in the campground of, um, who is also one of my advisors at the time through school and a dear friend. He's the man who arranged it so I could shower in that school during that time. He's the man who arranged it so I had food to eat and I had soap to wash myself. You so he took me to that big scary moment where I walked in to be interviewed by one of my neighbors. Literally, the man doing my interview lives 2 doors, 3 doors down from me, still to this day. Actually, now, I left church with him this morning. I go to his church. The
So he interviewed you around these accusations.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He asked me a whole bunch of vile, horrible questions,
Yeah.
dead to my face, and then called me an hour later and said, I wanted to tell you myself that social services is allowing you to go home. And we're sorry that it had to take this long. They call it the social services in the area calls us every month just to ask us how we're all doing from the trauma. So along the way, in that 25 days, in the very beginning of it, the first week, that's when I reached out to Lincoln. And I was actually in my first meeting from a campsite in a tent.
So
And
just
ever since
sort of
then,
out of the blue, you decided to reach out to
nah, I
Lincoln.
started reaching out to people that I knew
Have
I could talk to about anything.
You were just
And there's
using
not
the
a
tool
lot
of
of
reaching
those in the
out.
world. There's not a lot of those in the world.
Yep, yep. So you were just using the reach out tool, and he ended up in line somehow.
Well, no, he was real close to the top of my list, honestly,
Mm.
brother. I had made a real connection with him while we were locked up. And while we hadn't stayed real close the whole time, we did for a while, but then he had had a relapse before all that. So we
Did you
kind of
know
fell
he was
apart.
doing well when you reached out to him?
Yeah, I had looked on his Facebook page to see if he was doing well first because I didn't want to reach out and just get more troubles. I needed somebody that could listen,
Yeah.
because that was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through in my life. Being forced outside of my family's home, accused of harming my children, and I had never harmed my kids in any way. I've done my best my whole life to never even hurt their feelings. I mean, I'm studying to be a counselor. It's like in some effort because it helps me be a better dad.
Do you have any idea how that come about? Was there somebody
Well, it's all
vindictive that had a?
anonymous
I know.
officially.
Yeah, but
And
so's
uh
AA, right?
uh so I am like 99% certain I know in my head exactly who and how it happened, thanks to the conversation that happened after my interview with that same officer. Um,
Was it a
but
vindictive thing? Somebody that was actually trying, they just wanted to throw a pile of
well,
shit in your house?
I'm I've got to
How to
really
talk about it?
avoid.
Yeah, yep,
Got to,
we can, never mind.
yeah, we're not real sure.
Uh,
We'll never be sure unless that person has some ninth step work they need to do with me someday.
yeah, yeah.
So that's how I came back to Lincoln. I had experienced the worst trauma in my life, and I reached out to a brother that I had bonded with previously, thanks to this fellowship, and knew I could trust. And I just needed someone to vent to. And sure enough, that brother was there. Along the way, I'm now, let's see, what is the chapter after the wife's, the family afterward? That's the chapter I'm starting now. So I'll be sponsoring guys soon.
Yeah,
Um, before I
one of my favorite chapters.
before I experienced that trauma last year, I was still, um, despite having completely remained clean of meth and opiates the whole 9 years. And despite having carefully navigated some difficult situations in my life, I still didn't feel like I knew what my purpose was yet. And that traumatic situation led me to believe that that was my purpose.
Hmm.
I've been through a lot of traumatic situations. There's many that are completely skipped over. You've heard a couple, but every one of them is something that I survived. And in most cases, I survived it the right way. During that time, I didn't lash out. I didn't behave crazy. What I did was I leaned on my advisors through school and other organizations that were helping me out with school related funding, you know, and from there, I got more support and I leaned on my Bible and I leaned on the fellowship of AA. Because while I didn't know for sure if he was clean at the time, I knew he was a brother and he would at least listen.
Yep.
um, in the uh, so December the 6th, I kind of woke up and started working on that path on how am I to deliver the message of hope that all these traumatic situations that people think they can't live through, they can. All right, I'm still here. You can hear
Yep.
me?
So yep, I do. And I'm looking there and it's just said recording still in progress. And I do know because this is another anchor I've had. You said December the 6th of, and that's where it cut.
Yeah, so December the 6th of last year, I started working on a plan I have to deliver that hope. And since then, I went on 2 missions to go out in the world and do exactly that. Um, the plan that I started is called the House of Care, the project that I actually launched where I go out into facilities and tell people that are in recovery who don't believe they can use an education as one of their tools. They're like most people when I was in treatment, most of the guys I was sitting around there with thought I was full of crap when I told them I was going to get out and I was going to go to college someday and I was going to be a teacher. And at that point, that's what I thought I was going to do. It wasn't until I experienced some more trauma and had lived through it while still being in recovery that I learned that my real purpose is to help other people find hope that they can get through that trauma and help them find and navigate the tools they need to be able to do so. So that's what I do now. I'm head over heels, all in on a project of trying to help other people in recovery find a educational tool of some sort, whether it be a certification like welding or truck driving or a GED or a degree. Um, I think that everybody in recovery of any kind, whether that's recovery from addiction, recovery from homelessness, recovery from uh, suicidal clinic. They were clinically depressed, recovery from domestic violence. People can be in recovery from just about anything. And just like they can benefit from the tools that these books give us, these programs that we practice, they can also benefit from an educational tool, just like every person on earth can. And it's just a little harder for those who are trying to recover to be able to do it. And so I want to build an organization that supports them along the way, gives them the hope that they can do it too, and then helps them find a path and supports them while they get it done.
Yeah, super cool, man. Well, we're in the same, my sponsor and I are doing this, on the same mission, different way, different path, but
Yeah.
looking at that, everybody really is recovering from something. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a small percentage of people that slide by without really having anything go down. But everybody has something, and we just, we've been taught just to bear down and pull through it, forget about it, and move on. And that is not the path that I think if you really want to succeed. And when I say succeed, I mean have a we say happy, joyous, and free. Have a life where you are. I don't. What I'm making sure that when I say success, I am not talking about dollar signs. Dollar signs may
No,
come with it, but that's not.
no.
That's why I want to always make that caveat to go. But to have that life that you deserve to have,
Yeah.
you have to face those things and actually process them and truly put them away. And that's what therapy and the 12 steps and various other modalities allow you to do rather than what, for the alcoholic, the main tool is just stuff it down into the bottom of the can further,
Yeah.
and that's just not a good plan. So you started this House of Care Up on your own. This is you.
Yeah, so officially it's a concept right now with one active project known as the Hope Card Project, where I go out and I give my lead with a specific twist that I am a person who has utilized an educational tool in order to find a greater level of success. Today, I am a third year honors student at my college. I am the student trustee at my college. Today, I lead the honor students all across the entire state of Illinois in community service projects that don't just help students at their schools, but actually go out into their communities and affect the community abroad. Today, I have trust from every person I've ever harmed. Today, I have the courage to go to the detective who set me up back in 2013, literally coerced an informant into wearing a wire and calling me and saying, "Hey man, come sell me these drugs." Um, I went up to him and asked him if he'd be interested in potentially being a board member for my nonprofit. I've also approached the judge who prosecuted me, because today I find that that was uncomfortable and I learned from it. I grew. I learned that um, the fellowship of AA and has showed me that as long as I wake up and try to grow each day, and I wake up and I consult my God, ask him what I should do next, and then get in his word, I'm going to be doing better than I was the day before. And so that leads me to every morning waking up with new horizons ahead. I spent my last semester completing my internship here at the school as a worker in the food pantry. This semester, they've hired me at $15 an hour as a worker in the food pantry. And they're considering me seriously for a part-time position with an office in financial aid. I don't say all that stuff to brag. I say all that stuff because it makes me in awe of the power of my God and what these programs can do for you.
have you let me ask you this question. Has this was the book big book tells me that the plans that I'm going that what's going to happen if I follow these dictates of a higher power and I do this, these things that are going to happen are going to be better than anything I could have planned. So
Yeah,
I mean, did you ever
man.
plan to be like doing this? Was
No,
this ever in the past
no,
something you thought, well, you know what I want to do?
not in my
I just
wildest
want to make
dream.
that point because
My
me too.
wildest dream was I was going to study computer science, gain a master's in computer science, and teach computer science at the community college level. That's what I was going to do. Along the way, I'd probably do some contracted work and make some extra money, but that was all I cared about. And then, so we came here feeling like we were being told to throw away all of our possessions and go do something better. My wife studied to be a nurse. She's an LPN now. Um, and I really wasn't studying anything that helped people. So I kind of feel like no matter how that situation went down last year, it was God using a harmful thing to show me what he needed me to do,
Yeah.
and that's help others. I needed to understand what it took to get help around here in order to be able to help people around here. And then, like literally a month or so later, um, I had a conversation with somebody where they started talking about this property. And then I woke up on December the 6th and built a website. On June 16th, I launched the Hope Car Project, which you are a little familiar with that experience of me and my son came out to the Louisville area and I spoke at Danville, the facility I graduated from. That was super powerful moment, especially the fact that my son went with me
Mm.
because he came there 9 years ago and picked me up on March the 1st, 2016. He remembers that 4.5 hour drive up there from Henderson. And it was even longer this time
Mm.
because we got an additional 2 past there to get over where we're at.
Is
We
this the same son that
Yeah,
took the
James.
cop in the house?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's seen me in all of my madness. He was 4 years old when he let that officer in. He was just about to turn 5 whenever I came home. And so he's seen me in all the madness. He's seen me in my early clean days. And then he's seen me just bunker down and try to just get through. And then he's seen me grow and blossom after I found more tools,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
actually, he is my only biological son. We have a blended family. I have 3 stepdaughters that call me dad, and I'm honored to be a part of their life. And all 4 of them are working on little projects of how their experience as either a child of an actively using addict or as the child of a recovering addict, as how some way they struggled by that being a part of their identity. And so they're building their own programs under the House of Care to help other people struggle less in the same situations than they did. It's really cool.
Yeah. Super cool, man. And what I'm hearing too, and I've said this to some people a few times of like I'm working with a guy and I say, you know what? It really isn't that important to me that you get sober. It really isn't. What's important to me is your children grow up in a healthy environment. And
Yeah.
unless, and the only way that's going to happen is you get sober because that we need to do something to help the kids, and you're providing that example and getting them involved into this service oriented life on the joy and what comes into your heart when you actively go out and help people. There's no better drug than
Yeah.
to help
And
people.
that's something I
Uh,
was saying in church this morning, really, is that service is how I found my purpose.
yeah,
Whenever I was living in that homelessness last year, being a victim of some messed up stuff, or being sharpened and honed by my God, however you want to view it. Um, I had nowhere to go and nothing to do. So I got involved in every program and organization I could get my hands on here at school. Eventually, one of them gave me a leadership role. And then I got a bigger and better one whenever I doubled down. That situation, stepping into that opportunity of service and then seeing myself help others, seeing others be helped by my actions. That is the best damn drug I've ever done in my
Yep.
life, man. Seeing someone, being a part of helping someone. Oh my
Yep.
God.
And being hands on in it and get to witness it. And when I first started, my sponsor told me I was going to sponsor people, and of course, you never feel like you're qualified in the beginning. And
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
yeah, the first few times, these guys were getting better, but there was a point to where, like, you know, it, there's a point that the evidence piled up so deep I couldn't deny it any longer, and started seeing that this was actually doing this. This was a hands-on, watching their whole family heal, not just the guy I'm working with, and then being sold on it. And there was nothing. Again, I say over and over again, there's nothing that fulfills me more than walking a guy through these 12 steps and watching him get better, and watch the whole ripple effect of his family. And I've got sponsees whose parents see me in the grocery store and run up and hug me. They're where is that happening at? And so, yeah, man. And those opportunities are out there. You don't necessarily have to build something on your own. And I'm saying this for the people out there, is there's always somebody looking for your help. These organizations that are helping people don't have enough help.
Yeah,
And it's just wide open, because you know I don't know whether it's just, I'm going to say this, but I don't necessarily believe it. Some people aren't built to sponsor guys. Now, I don't really believe that necessarily, but if you're not built to do that, there's tons of other opportunities where you can
yeah, there
fulfill
really
the
are.
service end of what we do, recovery, unity, and service. And there's a bunch of ways. I've got guys that go down, and you might have seen some of them when you were here, that go serve the homeless every weekend.
At the
Every
the
Sunday
big
they're out
church
there.
downtown.
I don't really know where they do it, to
Well,
be honest.
we paired up
Uh,
whenever me and my son came down on Father's Day weekend. We paired up with a group that feeds and clothes the homeless downtown, and we participated in that. Actually, brought out 10 bags of clothes, help get their breakfast together.
yeah,
Then,
that's where all my old clothes go. Every
yeah,
time I'm done with something, I take them to Brian on Tuesday night,
yeah,
man, and
so that's
and
definitely who it was. Yeah, we hooked up with them. Yeah.
yeah, and but
Then
this is really impressive that you started something like this. So basically, because it's a risk, right?
yeah, I mean,
Of
the
going and
reality is for the
trying to.
last since December the 6th, I've been financially supporting the website myself. It costs me around 50 bucks a month. I've done all that work myself. All of the documents that have been generated, I've done all that myself. Um, we will be paying for the documentation to become a licensed 501(c) next month, hopefully on in the third week of September. And so also we are going to be signing the contract on our first facility in Brookport, Illinois, um, in November, ideally, and starting our renovation in January. And I'm doing all that right now out of my own pocket because it's what God's called me to do. It's not about I got to do it because I need to be a leader of something. I did it because there's an absence of services in the community I plan to start that organization in. Along the way of working to build an organization, I've become actually a member of a few recovery oriented councils around here and learned and connected with other organizations. And I'm building partnerships already with organizations that will be available to serve that community whenever we get there. So it's all really awesome.
Yeah, super cool, dude. Really is. And I get it earlier in the podcast. You said something about, I'm not saying this to brag, and I totally understand your heart there 100%, but I fall in the same place sometimes where it sounds like it, I have no, we're told to keep it on the eye, right? Speak about
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
experience, but some people can, you can hear that I am doing this and I am doing that and I am doing this and I am doing that, and it begins to sound like something more self-centered than what it is. And that's a funny little line to walk, again, in everything in life, it seems the pendulum swings both ways, man. It's
Yeah,
over here or it's over there.
for
And
me personally, in my active addiction, pride and ego as a drug dealer is something that I struggled with. Obviously, it literally ruled my life beyond the drugs I had to put in my body. It was my pride and my ego. I had to be the best drug dealer,
yeah,
and I didn't care who I harmed along the way, you know. But and so as a result of that, and being the fourth and fifth step work I did with my sponsor, I learned that those are things I need to constantly be aware of. So I do try to remove the I as much as I can from my story
but
because I
you
can do
have no
nothing
other
on
thing
my
to talk
own.
about. Yeah, but you have no other thing to talk about but what your experience is, and that come from Mike. I come from Michael, and so and I know. See, I hear you to that point, and I understand it. Really, what I'm doing is showing you what I'm talking about is the power of God, the power of 12 steps, the power of these tools we're using,
Yeah.
and how they impacted me personally, right? Because I can't speak for what it's done for you, although I can give examples now and again and talk about, because I've got, I got a group of men in a meeting every Tuesday night that I'm in contact with, that I can tell you some unbelievable stories about where these guys were and where they're at now. Like your story is almost like incomprehensible in a sense, right? To be
Yeah.
where you were and to do what you were doing and then get to where you are now, it doesn't make sense, right? It's like, how can that happen? But I can talk about you, and I can talk about LJ, and I can talk about Travis, and the list goes on and on and on about these same guys. It's my sponsor like says, the scientific approach is to take something and do something to it and see what the outcome is. And then the other thing is to do that and repeat it, right? And you can't say it's real unless you can repeat that, right? It's not, it's a hypothesis, and then it becomes an actual theory when you can actually prove that this thing works
Are you
and you
like
get
walking
this.
around in my life, watching me all the time? We were just talking about that in sociology
Oh, where
assignments
you
this
at?
morning. Yeah.
Yep. So this is like a human washing machine. You put the human through the machine, and out pops out this person. Like what another thing I heard you was talking about is uh how hard we work, right? Recovered alcoholics in the right frame of mind are the best work.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah.
would hire if they could. We go in thinking we got to hide our past and that kind of thing. And actually, the flip side of that is and more in the community is becoming aware at if you have if you have or if you're in recovery and have arrested this disease, that's the guy you want to hire.
Yeah,
uh,
I've actually, since I've taken more professional roles around this area, I mean, I'm now a community leader. It's mind blowing. I couldn't imagine that. Uh, um, and now since I'm taking these roles, that's exactly what I'm seeing, you know?
and that's another piece of like an offshoot of this, because again, I came here to not go to prison, which meant I came here to get sober. But the offshoots of this stuff where these men's children aren't having to grow up in an
Right.
alcoholic family. The people, because I wear my recovery on my sleeve, I would wear a hat that said AA and a big shirt. Wouldn't matter to me. Uh, and I talk to my clients. I'm always out running around. I'm in people's homes. I do handyman work and woodworking and this kind of stuff. So I'm in a number of people's homes a week, and something will happen, and they'll ask me like, "Well, how come? Well, how'd you learn about that?" Or I can have a string of phone calls, and I tell my client I need to step away for just a second because I need to take these calls. I know it ain't going to be like a long time. And I'm just open about, I'll come back to them and I say, well, I'm in recovery, and, I really do feel serious. I am, uh, I can't come up with the word. dedicated to that. When these guys call me and they need to talk, that I'm going to give them my time, and then my clients are like, oh really? And then what'll happen almost, also, is that they'll be like, my son or my, has struggling with stuff, and we get to do this ripple effect. And where I was going with this is like being able to have this effect in your community, as far as like the hiring of alcoholics and the people that may have felonies and may have this kind of stuff, but they have recovered now, and that's the guy you want. And you get, that's a ripple effect, a consequence. And that's, there are so many positive consequences that come radiating off of a dude that is doing like what you're doing. It's
I
not just
really,
the inner circle; it ripples out.
yeah, I really never would have imagined that people would value me more for being open and honest about everything I've ever struggled with.
Yeah.
Like, those are all the things that we shamefully hide in our darkness. We're trying to keep those things in our closets, and the reality is, as I come into professional environments and I start telling them all the crap I've been through, they're like, I mean, you want to run the place?
Yeah, it is crazy. It's and I am I am committed to standing on the mountain and beating this 12-step drum as loud as I can beat it, so that as many people hear it can hear it. I don't think God ever intended the anonymity principle to be kept at the level that some people want to keep it. My sponsor says that God sent these tools down here, and the only people he knew, the only people desperate enough to do this stuff was the alcoholics. But it was really sent down here for everybody.
Yeah.
And but the alcoholics, it was the foot in the door.
And
And
I
it's what
really,
I've had the opportunity to sponsor some normal people through the TSSR thing, and that is super cool too, to be able to present these. That's what I mean about like the evidence-based thing. It's not all being alcoholics and addicts that I've had the opportunity to practice this with, and to teach this way of doing life. I've done it with normal people too, and they get the same results, and they can stand there like you're talking and have the same kind of like how unbelievable their life is now as a result of doing this work,
yeah,
and keep doing it.
that
That's the other thing.
that other program, that TSSR you mentioned, that's something Chris does, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris and I.
LJ was telling me about it once, and I was thinking that that might be a tool that my clients someday could really use, because there's like, our goal is to be able to help anybody struggling through any trauma that our family has lived through. And there's a lot of those. My wife is a victim of domestic violence. I'm a childhood sex crimes victim. Um, my children have definitely been children of addicts. So that's different than being children of people in recovery, you know. Uh,
Mm,
we have, both me and one of my children have suffered at different times with suicide. Um, and so that TSSR, as you said, it could be something that any of those people who aren't struggling necessarily with addiction specifically, uh, could utilize to help them recover.
yeah.
I'd love some info or something, a link or something.
The there's a, for lack of a better term, it's wore out in itself. There's a stigma wrapped up too about it's a reverse stigma about 12-step recovery. Because if you're not an alcoholic and you're not an addict, that's the only thing you can
Yeah,
hear when you see that. I don't need that. Why would I do
yeah,
that? It's just for alcoholics and addicts. It's
right.
just,
I mean,
and
it's in the
we're
name.
trying to, yeah, it is. That's why we said 12-step spiritual recovery.
Yeah,
It is using the 12 steps to recover your spirit. You'd said that earlier. We have a definition of recover, and it's right out of the dictionary. It says to reclaim that which was lost or stolen.
yeah.
And whether it's, some of your stuff was stolen through trauma and people doing stuff to you that you didn't have any control over, and some of it was lost because, I took a path where I gave away some of myself. And so I fall in both of those things. So they'll ultimately just to recover. And when it says to reclaim what which was lost or stolen, my very being, my spirit, my soul was stolen and lost, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm getting back. That's what I am recovering. The true
From
real damn.
sometimes, in my first I mean, sometimes still to this day, I feel like, as a child, because I was exposed to the narcotics at 7 years old, before I really had much of a chance to figure out who I am or what I wanna be or any of that stuff, that was most of the first, like, 5 years of my recovery, just trying to figure that stuff out, man. And it was hard, because I was doing it on parole and doing it while trying to take care of myself and doing it while taking care of a new family. Because me and my wife met less than a year after I came home. So,
Very cool, brother. Uh, I do want to send me a couple links and stuff so that I can put it in the show notes of what like your website and that kind of thing. I just want to
oh,
make sure I get it
you
right.
need to
Not
drop
now,
that in the
just here.
chat?
No, well, I would rather you text it to me,
Okay,
uh,
sure.
and you don't have to do it right now
It's
because it's
it
going to
is
take me
super
a minute
simple.
to
It's the
produce this thing.
houseofcare.net
.net. Okay.
or
All right.
.org,
All right.
but I will definitely send it over.
Yeah. Because yeah, that's another thing about what's going on here in with the Spiritual Underground podcast specifically is, as I said in the introduction, uh, this program tells me I need to continue to grow spiritually in order to keep what I've got. And there's a lot of things going on and trying to connect. You know, one thing may not be somebody's vibe, but this over here might be their vibe. So to try and create a web of this intersecting modalities and stuff, I've
Yes.
got a gal going to be on Wednesday night that she contacted me, and that's another crazy thing is that people are contacting me, want to be authors and stuff like this, are contacting me, wanting to be a guest on the Spiritual Underground podcast. And a gal lined up for Wednesday who is from when we started talking time zones. She was not even in the same day I was in. And she's in New Zealand,
Oh, that's really
and you're like,
cool.
yeah, it gets and another thing you'll hear me say, especially when those people are on the shows, is that I'm primarily 12-step recovery based podcast, but I also explore other ways that people can reclaim their souls or spirits. And if you watch the news and you do that kind of stuff, the world looks like it's going to shit. But I keep on running into people, powerful people like you and like the gal from New Zealand and many others that are forces for the good. And I think that's a little bit of the camouflage that the whatever you want to say, the world, if you want to call it the devil, you want to call it the
Yeah.
dark forces, all that, that's whatever that is, doesn't want you to see all this good that's going on because that's not on the news, right?
No, of
Uh,
course.
you had to get into things like this and give each other exposure, and we're a whole bunch of lighthouses up spinning around, testifying to the light, and we shine each other's lights
You know
so
why
that
it's
there's
not
more
on
light.
the news? You know why it's not on the news?
Wow.
That word,
Anonymous.
anonymous.
Yeah,
'Cause yeah, I'm right here on a recovery related podcast, and I just told a whole lot of details of my story. But I can tell you right now, I was not authorized to go on the 10 o'clock news and tell all those details of my
yeah,
story. That is not what I discussed with my family.
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, cool, brother. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on and telling your story and saying, talking about, carrying this 12-step message and the message of hope that you bring to the table, man. And uh, everybody's story touches somebody, right? We kind of have that little saying that says, if I can only, if it just helps one person, I've done what I can do.
Yeah.
But I
Oh
know that
man.
it's more than that. And we're out there trying to do that one person at a time.
Yeah, I said that to my wife yesterday whenever I received a message from someone randomly on my Facebook. So one of the other things I've been doing as like a spread hope thing is I've been making these inspirational posts every morning and putting them out there in the name of the House of Care.
Yeah.
And so yesterday morning, I got someone randomly messaged me. It's someone I kind of know of from my past, but not really. It's not someone I really know personally. But they messaged me randomly and said, "Hey, thank you for being an inspiration to me. By the way, I've decided to stop drinking." I cried for the next 30 minutes when I read that message of telling my wife, man, I hoped to someday do that one time. Years down the line, after I have established all these facilities and spread this organization across every state in the country, that was the hope someday. And it's powerful how much more is always on the horizon if you're doing what's right each day.
Mark Houston, ceased AA speaker that I listen to a lot. He said, "I smell more." And I use that quite often that because I do. That's the way I go through life. I smell more.
Yeah,
There's something new and refreshing around every corner today.
I like that.
Yeah, man. Well, do you have any? I always offer my guests any concluding thoughts or any anything if you want to uh, promote what's going on, or if you have a thought for the new guy that's out there suffering and doesn't know where to go, or
Sure.
anything at all that you want to close out with.
Well, broad thought. All right. So it doesn't matter what situation you're in life, what struggle you go through. There's nothing in the world you can really control but yourself and how you deal with it. And your best option is always to have as many tools available as possible. I found that Alcoholics Anonymous is a powerful tool for me. Specifically, the Spiritual Underground group has been a very powerful tool for me. I've also found that education and volunteer work and close connection to family and my community are all tools that I need in order to be the best me I can. And it don't matter what you're going through, somebody else has been through it and survived it. You can too.
Heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah. So book says they simply lay down this kit of spiritual tools in front of somebody, and ultimately it's a really simple set of tools. We're not asking you to run marathons or do anything particularly hard.
Just use
And you
words,
can,
man.
yeah, you can change your life forever and the lives of everybody around you.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I always say a couple things at the end of this podcast. Uh, can't turn off my volume, and this is a new computer, so it's coming there and beeping on me. Uh, I say, uh, if you're not having a blast in your recovery, you're not doing it right.
No.
And I just want to thank everyone out there for allowing Michael and I to participate in our recoveries and yours in this manner today. Peace out.